Hey guys, we are actually running early though. We are actually Pat is supposed to come on at 4:05, and he is right in front of us. That's 3:45. So Pat,
I can take extra 15 minutes, no worries.
no, I know, but you need to actually give us more where we say not enough, correct?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so go ahead, rock the boat.
Sure, sure. Do you want to, because I think the previous presentation I sort of skipped the intro. Lai, do you want to just do that for the recording, or you're happy for me to just go ahead?
Yeah, sure. Actually, Mr. Pat leads the charge across the industry with the mobile first platform. He has overseen 20 years of information technology evolution and will speak about the heightened importance of mobile defenses over devices, networks, and also application. In the meanwhile, Mr. Pat is also the Vice President for Pre-Sales Zimperium. So, while you are preparing, Mr. Pat, I would like to request the audiences to also respond to our request to submit their feedback form. So I'll be sharing the transition slide shortly in the screen. There is a QR code that you can scan.
I'm just sharing first. Okay, go ahead.
La, you can share.
Yep, I'm sharing now. Hold on,
Looks like we pulled out live from his lunch.
Sorry, you caught me in the middle. All right.
Hey guys, yeah.
Camera is coming very blurred.
Oops, it's too loud.
La, you have not shared anything yet, buddy.
Do you see it on the screen now?
Coming up, I suppose.
Yes.
Yes. Go ahead.
All right. So guys, they're still with us now. There is a QR code on each transition slide that will actually bring you to our feedback form. Please kindly submit it to us, and we will revert back to you with your request of the presentation material that you wanted from the sessions or from the speakers. And this feedback will be used for our next event. It will greatly improve the experience that we can create to you in the future. Mr. Pat, are you ready?
Yes, yes, I am.
Over to you.
Thank you, Lai.
Okay. La, you have to unshare your side.
Okay, let's do that. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm back again, and thank you for all the speakers before me. Clement, is this the last session before the Q&A?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
Pat. After this, there's a Q&A. Guys, whatever questions you have, please put it up in the Q&A boxes, and we'll take it after the Pat. We'll give you a 5 minutes break, and then we'll come back with all the questions collated, and we will try to answer as many of them in the following 20-30 minutes before we go for the closing comment track. Okay, thank you, guys.
Great. Thank you, Clement. Okay, so I think we've discussed a lot of from the experienced speakers and industry leaders, right, around the situation that we are in today. I think the last topic for today, I wanted to sort of focus around something I think is very important, regardless whether you are a small businesses, whether you're a big large enterprise. The common denominator and the playing field that everybody is fighting on is really this mobile application. Right, we hear about digital transformation. I think even with COVID, it's making us trying to innovate differently. And the reality is that if you don't innovate, your businesses are probably going to be disrupted, right, by some other application-based technology. So really, I wanted to share with you guys, some of the best practices and really what's happening on the application security space and why you should be why you should care about it and why you should do something about it. Okay, so let's start with this fundamental question, right? you have your application on the left-hand side, and I think Mr. Abita have used a great analogy, right? Using the house. I think security house, is actually a really good example to illustrate, the different construct, right? The concept. So on the left-hand side, you see a very secure room, right? It's like a vault. You put, all the important stuff in the vault. You lock the vault, right? So this is essentially what most of the organization does today, right? If they care about the information on the application, they protect the application. They're making sure data are stored, are communicated safely, and then they finish the development. And what happens after that is the application then goes into the App Store, right? Publicly Apple and Google Store. Then what happens is the user will then download the application. From this point onwards, you have no control about where your application is running, right? So let's use the example on the right-hand side. Your application could be running in the house, or like this, which is already compromised, running an outdated version of a mobile phone operating system. Maybe already have Trojan or malware on it, right? And it's already in a compromised state. So now, if you think about this picture here, what is the problem we are trying to highlight here, right? The reality is, doesn't matter how secure your application is. What happens on the right-hand side is that you have no control of the environment it runs on. If your application do not have the awareness, the device, it's just a matter of time the application will be compromised. When we say the application, think about the data that it has. Think about all the information that's sensitive to your business and your customer's business, right? So really, I think the challenge we all have to face today, apart from fighting the pandemic, is that how are you giving your application the ability to defend itself in the wild. Okay, so coming back to some of the data, right? I was a developer before, and I think one of the challenge I have is that as a developer, if you talk to many of them, they're actually always being pressured to deliver features and functions, and very quickly, right? And your business will tell you, I want it yesterday. The reality at the security side is that the developers are actually not security experts, and vice versa. The security team are usually not developers, so they wouldn't know how to write the code securely, right? So now we actually have a gap, a problem between developers and actually required to produce secure coding. So really, if we look at the survey, right, some of the data point actually tells us a lot of people are building applications today just to be competitive, to increase the service, user experience. On the right-hand side, they are not so sure about coding and practices and security because maybe the application are outsourced and there's no way for them to check, and they actually maybe don't own the IP, intellectual property of the app, or a lot of the time they are actually providing the requirement and then say you have to just go and get it done. Right? And as a developer, what I used to do with something that I'm not sure and I have to do, I will go to Google, I'll find how to detect jailbreak, how to make sure the device is not rooted or not compromised, get the code, copy and paste into my app, run it, and then I pass through, focus on the function rather than the security. Now, what are the thing that people want from your application, right? So we're seeing a lot of example earlier. But let's talk about some classic example. And this example here actually is not specific for mobile. If you guys are familiar with general application, back in the early days, there's a lot of application that gets compromised or cracked, right? You have all the people not willing to pay for software. This kind of problem exists since day one of the software industry. It's only just happening and applying to mobile. And is not something new, right? So in your application, you might have certain logic, certain code, certain intellectual property about maybe some investment, maybe some logics around how certain process works, right? If your application is not protected well, then someone can essentially open it up and understand the application logic, and maybe take part of your code and then pirate that and create that into a different application, right? In your application these days, it doesn't actually have a lot of the logic, right, as we described. It might rely on all the services in the backend, right, using APIs and etc. And when this type of architecture comes up, in order for you to communicate with the backend, you usually require authentication keys and tokens and etc. Again, where does those information go? It goes into the application. And if it's not protected, again, you're exposed, right? I've talked about the intellectual property there. I give you the example, fraud. So we'll actually have a case study later. Banking application. I think just in Malaysia in the last few months, we have seen example of the e-wallet application. I think not just one, I think several of them got compromised, right? In other parts of the world, in Southeast Asia, we're seeing those cases, banking Trojans, etc. Right? And the example that Clement actually demonstrated using Pokemon Go. Think about your application, right? Someone can take it, inject something that is not part of it, and then create a new version of it, right? So again, this is a risk that you do not want your brand and reputation to be impacted because the lack of security control. And then last is really inside your application, there's a lot of information that's valuable to the attacker, right? And you've seen from the previous presenter, those information might be easily get right through some of the web services or free forum, you can grab them, right? But the idea is that if I have a malware that goes out to many users, maybe with a 500,000 download, a million download, then those devices become my harvest location. Okay, so these are all the bad things. And then actually, what we see as well in terms of the data point is that we're seeing that there's a huge increasing mobile attack around applications. Right, so you can see here on the left-hand side, there's an increasing, raw mobile application. There are actually applications being used as a Trojan, right? And the problem of a fake application. Yeah. So I think Clement knows how to do it. That type of technique is open source, so anyone can do this, right? So really, the question is that how do you protect against that? But more importantly, from the business standpoint, right, we all really care about the bottom line given the current challenges. So if you look at some of the data from RSA, this is done last year. If you look at all the fraudulent activity, the activity are now moving from the web portal or website into mobile and mobile applications, right? You can see here, just by the breakdown, the increases are actually dramatically focusing around mobile application. Again, I think this is, emphasize the point that you really need to do something. Let's use a very classic example, right? Very topical. I think we all by now, right? Probably everybody got sick of the COVID case studies, right? So I promise this will be the last one, yeah? So, we have seen fake COVID-19 tracing application. As you know, all the governments are trying their best effort, right, to help the community to stop, spreading of the viruses. All the government, in fact, even open source their code, right, making sure that they're privacy-wise, they are protecting users' information. They're not collecting as much data as possible until there's contact, infection, etc. But the reality is that those applications are open source. They're usually not protected. But think about this, right? If an open source application is not protected, that means I can take the code, I can create my own, I can have the same name of it, and I can distribute that throughout the mechanism through social engineering, right? So we have seen an example of the app that actually got turned into ransomware that will encrypt the devices, that actually used to add extra tracing features, right? So normally the Bluetooth is on, but this application have GPS and have access to your contact, have all these things that you probably don't think is necessary, but you're looking at it. This is actually an Indian-based application that that got compromised and then attacked. So these things are happening, and it can happen to your application. Now, just moving on, this is another great example. In this part of the world, you guys are familiar with the Grab and Gojek application, right? So we use them, now even with the current state, we use it to buy, order food, and then do a lot of the things, right? Not so much on taxi anymore, but all the other services. So do you know that these applications, such a high-profile application, there's actually a discussion forum that is selling modified version of this application, right? And this is a specific use case around the driver customer base, right? So they allow a modification of the driver app. Essentially, if you look at it as a driver app, you have certain restriction, right? How many times you can cancel the job, what verification you need, certain locations that you have preset, etc. So those business rules are actually inside the application. So imagine if I can take that app, remove all these restrictions, package it up. Now they are able to sell it for $300 a month as a SaaS. And then the user would be able to get the benefit and then maximize their profit. So if something like this can happen to such a high-profile application, this type of activity can actually happen to any application. Yeah. So I think I've given you some example. So let's summarize, right? What are the common attack technique, right? And for the people who's more technical, you might be familiar with the terms. For the non-technical people, I'll make it very simple. So there's actually two ways the attacker typically would have access to your application. First thing first, do you remember when Clement was doing the demo, he has the Pokemon Go APK file. So that file is essentially all the development engineering source code that has been used to create that application. It's now down into one package, right? And where do I get that package? When the package is published to Google and Apple, that package is available and is available for everybody, including you as well as the hacker. So when the attacker gets that file, it's very easy for them to open up the file, look into the code, and see anything that they can actually find, right? And this is what we call offline attack or static attack, because for this file to actually be accessible, I do not need to connect to the internet, right? I do not have to even leave my computer. I can do all this in isolation, and I can actually try to understand the application. And the example that Clement gave you was really good, because that's essentially like an offline attack, because it takes the app, blow it apart, adds all the extra permission, adds the malware payload and the connection, and then wraps that up again. And that was as simple as that. Within a few minutes, you have your repackaged application, right? But important thing I also find a lot is that your application might contain some sensitive API keys, like your things you pay for Google, for advertising, etc. And those information can also be taken out of the code if it's not protected. Okay, so really the best practice here is you want to try to protect your application, make it difficult for the attacker to reverse engineer and look at the content and try to make changes, right? Because if you don't do that, then your application is quite easily to be repurposed to in a bad way. Now, you can probably think about another hat, right? So now, assuming, right, you can tell me, okay, Pat, I understand the importance. Let me go and use the solution to harden and obfuscate or make this application difficult for people to reverse. And what happened is the attacker is also very smart, because once you have this protected app, when I open it, I see all the gibberish, but it's easy for me to actually do the attack, because rather than opening it up, I can then install this onto my phone. Again, hacker control the phone, hacker control the house. The house is already compromised. The application can be interrogated and inspected, right? So what the attacker can do is actually install the application, run it up, and start looking at how the application interacts with the mobile devices, with the backend, and they can actually intercept the traffic. They can actually look into the code where the data are stored, right? Or even do some runtime, advanced runtime injection, right? So these are some of the things the attacker can do, both in online and offline fashion. Okay, let me give you a really good example on the financial side, right? So Tesco Bank, maybe you would say, is not so a famous bank, but if you look at all the digital business today, everybody's trying to compete in everybody's market, right? So they actually had an interesting case study, because the bank actually have all the protection and obfuscation done to their application, right? So they harden the application. It's very hard for people to attack the application. But what happened is that these applications are still compromised, right? So you actually wonder what happened, because I thought by protecting it is good enough, right? So what the story behind this scenario is that there's actually a whole bunch of API that user can actually apply for a debit card under $500 of limit, right? The attacker was able to look at the application, look at the API, and work out, well, there's actually an easy way for me to create a whole bunch of those debit cards, right, by the API, and then very quickly use those debit card, because it comes back with a $500. It actually able to spend it, right? And all this attack happens within 24 hours. And the attacker only had to compromise the application running on a few mobile devices. And that was enough to introduce a 2.5 million money of those people's account being stolen. I think the bigger problem really for the bank, due to the regulation, is the fact that they had to pay fine for not doing good enough practices and security oversight around protecting the customers' information. Okay, so this is actually a real case study, and let me break it down into a little bit more on the technical side, just for the technical audience. We're looking at this application here, right? So this is the banking application. The attacker did not even touch the application at all, right? But what did the attacker do? They install a malicious application on the phone, right? Remember the house is broken. It's broken because it has something bad happening. This malware actually used the vulnerability or the problem on the device to gain privileged access. So Clement mentioned about the cyber Q chain, right? So you're a normal user on the mobile phone, now you become a super user. When you become a super user, what's really cool about super user is that you not only see your application, you see all these other applications information and all the communication on them, right? So what the attacker was able to basically inspect all the communication between the bank and the application, which is not touched, and the backend server, right? And through the inspection of this, it was able to understand, okay, so you're using this API call to create a debit card account, and this is the response. This is the account number you put in. So let me just try multiple account numbers and just go try my luck, right? So by doing that, injecting a fake transaction going to the backend. By the way, this application is not touched. This backend server is also not able to detect any attack because the transactions are legitimate coming from an application from a mobile device, right? So there's no context and no security monitoring that enables or allow them to say, hey, something is going on, right? So what was happening is that because of this behavior, by attacker compromising the device, then injecting fake transaction, they were able to essentially achieve this attack. So I think the moral of the story is looking inside the application, protecting the application is what we have been doing for the last 10 years. Now we need to look forward and look at the new ways that people are actually taking advantage of this mobile environment, and you need to have a new way of actually protecting your application. Okay, so now I just want to quickly touch on regulations, because that might be relevant in some parts of the world and audience that we're talking about. And I only actually have two from Malaysia. There is the RMIT, right, governed by the Bank Negara. And actually, I really like about this regulation here because there's actually a mention of, you have to ensure that mobile devices is in a secure fashion and the device has not been compromised and jailbroken or rooted, right? So this is actually the first time. I don't know how many of you guys can distinguish between a jailbroken or compromised device. Does it sound the same to you guys? In reality, it's actually very different, right? Jailbroken is not about, jailbroken for most people's understanding or rooting is a state, it's binary. Is the device jailbroken or not? Is the device rooted or not, right? Let's use the house example again. Basically, jailbroken is a check to say that is the bad guy inside my house, yes or no, right? Whereas compromise is different. Compromise actually give you more information around, is my front door open? Is my window broken? Is my window left unlocked? Is someone drilling a hole in my house? Has someone start digging or coming out from the roof? These are all the indicator compromises. Obviously, they range between the risk level, but it's very important to understand. When you actually check for is bad guy inside my house, it's usually too late. And it's too late for you to prevent anything, because once they're in, they'll take what they want, they'll get out, right? So I really like this regulation here, because the fact they called out the differences. And we as a security or IT professional need to be more aware, because I can be on your device. If you remember the example on my previous demo on the iPhone, right? The iPhone is actually in a compromised state. It's technically not jailbroken, because when the attacker got in, it was not persistent. When the phone reboots itself, the connection or the control goes away. But then I can come back in again and compromise again and get the information I want, right? So this is really good in terms of the government actually paying attention and differentiate those type of threat vectors. Now, looking at Singapore, somewhere closer to us as well, there's actually two areas of focus. One is around mobile application, security, right? Talking about the fact. Remember the Tesco Bank example, right? There's all these ability to insert transaction, inject transaction, inspect. So that's the kind of activity or behavior called hooking and tampering when the application call is running, okay? Then there are all these other ideas, right? Checksum, digital signature. So how can I create a fake version of Pokemon Go if I don't have the ability to say, hey, is my application being modified when I start it up, right? So these are all the common technique that you need to think of that should be able to help you protecting the application. On the scanning side, this is really talking about what steps do you take if it's outsourced by your by a third party. How can you assure that they're actually doing a good job, right? So there's actually certain level of assessment, pen testing, a regular check to allow that the data that you're actually collecting on the app, the way you're communicating, you're storing the data are compliant to, say, for example, GDPR, to NIST in terms of data policy, or even security-wise against the OAuth top 10 standards, right? So there are, platforms and tools, and we as Zimperian as a company offers those capability for the developers and also the application owners. Okay, so I wanted to actually use this opportunity. So I think I've talked for 20 minutes already. So I wanted to not to present the product now. I wanted to show you a very quick demo, right? This is unplanned, Clement, but I thought it would make it more interesting to just explain the concept a little bit more. Okay, so let me share my screen. I know how to share. Okay, here we go. Please let me know if you can see my screen, Clement.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. So guys, so I've talked a lot about the problem of mobile app and security, and I want to just give you a very simple example, because according to I think most people will agree, right? If a device is jailbroken, which is basically all the security feature on this device has been disabled, okay? In theory, important application like banking application, etc., should not be able to run on this device, right? In fact, the regulation actually state that, right? The application shouldn't be able to run. So let's show you an example of the scenario that I described before. When the device is jailbroken, your application is designed to check, right, if the device is good or bad. Remember the binary numbers, right? However, if your device is jailbroken, the attacker actually can manipulate those questions that your application asks, because all the logic is written in your application, right? So let's go back to the PowerPoint slide here. Let me just go and just explain here. So what we're going to show you now is this application is fantastic. It's protected. It has the jailbreak detection and security construct, right? So when it opens up, it will check, is my device jailbroken? And who does he go and ask the question? He goes to the operating system, right? And guess who controls the operating system? The attacker. So any question you ask, is the device jailbroken? I can very easily say no, right? And then we're going to show you how is that even possible. And this is actually possible on most of the banking application, or even your very beloved e-wallet application, and why these application actually all need to really pay attention. Okay, so now I'm going to show you, this is my iPhone or iPad device, and this device here has if you guys are familiar, this is Uncover is actually a very well-known jailbreak tools. You can actually download them, and as a security professional, if you want to try this, you can download them. These are all open source tools. Okay, so device is jailbroken, yeah, and I can also confirm to you that it has CDR. This is the application where I can download and install all the application that I'm not supposed to be running, and it's perhaps some of the solution offers more features than the traditional application that's out there, right? You can find WhatsApp plus and all these other things. So this is the condition here, and as I showed you guys before, we actually have the Zimperian application installed on this device. So let me just quickly show you. We have validated that the device is actually jailbroken. Okay, so you can see here it's not only running vulnerable device, jailbroken and compromised. Okay, now I wanted to show you something interesting. I'm going to open up application here. So I have the local banking application here. So I'm not picking anyone, but I'm just wanted to show you. I'm going to open up the CIMB app. Okay. So I just wanted to pause a few seconds and see here. Very interesting. The application launched, yeah, and it's asking me for user ID. It's not saying, hey, your device is jailbroken, go away. Okay, so now let me open up another app. I think, Clement, what bank do you use? You don't have to tell me.
I don't have to tell you.
I'm gonna open up another one anyway. Okay, so now I'm picking two banks here. That's all local, and both of the banking application, by the way, they all check for jailbreak. And what happened here is that they actually failed to detect and think this device is okay and you are safe to do business. Now, why is this possible? Let me go to and show you a little bit more. As I mentioned before, right, when the device is jailbroken, when bad guys in your house, when someone's checking is the device compromised, is the house broken, I can always tell you no, right? So I actually have a set of tools here. Just Okay, let me just find them here. So once your device is jailbroken, you can actually install utility. Can't find them now. Just let me scroll down a little bit. It's on the bottom. Okay, so did you see there is a few applications here? So let me just pick this one here. So this is one of the utility or add-on you can install to say that, hey, you see here, I can block jailbreak detection. So if I go in here, it gives me a list of applications that I want to block for jailbreak detection. Notice here, right, the CIMB apps are being turned on, right? I have all these other apps, okay, and you know the Maybank app, right? So that's why when I was launching the application, it actually allowed me to log in. So let's do this, right? Let's verify how effective this is, right? I'm picking some of the apps here, and by the way, this doesn't work for all of the app, but I think you'll find for about 60 to 80% of the application that falls into this category. So what I'm doing simply is to disable the faking of the answering on jailbreak check. Okay, so now without having doing anything, I'm going to swipe the application away. Let me go back to the application again. Okay, I'm going to launch the application, and you guys saw, right, with your own eyes, the application was working okay. Now let's have a look. Ooh, wow, your device is jailbroken. You cannot use this one due to the security vulnerability. Did you see that? With that flick of a switch, I can trick the application to think your environment is not real. Yeah. Now let's go and do the same thing here. Let's open our Maybank. Oh wow. Okay. Same thing. Very quickly, it was able to detect and tell me that device is compromised, and it's the same device. There's no editing. It's actually the same thing, right? So I want to talk about this very important point here, right? Today, all the jailbreak detection relies on this thing called signature, or they look for patterns, right? And the attackers are now getting more sophisticated. They're using AI. They're using something better than you. So if, as a developer, if you're trying to keep up with all these challenges every day, you need to be a damn good security security person as well as developer, right? And not everybody can find those type of capability out there. So the way we actually solve this problem is to, rather than the developer have to write their code and check for things, which can be tricked very easily, we actually have our capability embedded into an SDK as part of the AI engine, right? So let me just quickly show you the example. I have an iOS application here. It's actually a banking app that we wrote, embedded with our SDK, right? And very simple. You actually don't have to check for anything. You just have to check if the device is compromised or not, right? You don't actually have to write logic to say, oh, do they have this app? Do they have that app, right? Make the whole developer's job a lot easier. So I'm going to run this application now. Go back to my tablet, and you see very, briefly that the Zimperium banking app, or ZBank, will actually show up here. Okay, so it will get installed on the device, and you actually get launched. Okay, so I just wanted to show you, because this application has the behavior machine learning engine, when the application is launched, right, it's going to perform the check, but it's actually going to be able to tell you if the device is really compromised or not. Okay, so now you can see I'm saying allow for notification, and within a second or two, you'll see, let me just move this out a little bit. Okay, you can see the device has been tempered, right? The device is considered as jailbroken, and the device actually, because the application trying to provide the fake answer, the application also is being tempered in the runtime. Okay, so now let me just quickly show you, because you're thinking, oh, maybe you didn't turn on the jailbreak hiding, right? So let me go back to here. Let me go back to the application here. If you go all the way down, you can see the ZBank application is actually enabled, right, with the hiding. So the important thing to take away here, as a developer, you don't have to worry about how the attacker trick you. It's our job to keep ahead using AI and advanced technique to help you protect your application. But we know, right, by the time you actually know someone is inside your house, it's too late, and you really need to be able to stay ahead of the competition, right? So this is I hope this is, sort of puts the demonstration into perspective. And the last thing I wanted to show you, rather than talking about more slides, is I'm just gonna go and start a new window. I'm just gonna quickly show you what the feedback you actually get, right? Because today, once your application goes to the App Store, you actually no longer have information about who's using your, you have information on who's using the app, the performance, but you actually don't get any security feedback around who is attacking your application, what's going on, what are the kind of indicators, okay? So what we actually have, here, just give me 1 second. So you can see here, right? We actually provide you a real-time view as the devices are connected, as the user downloaded your application with the protection, you're able to see the user, the devices and the type of event that has been detected. You're able to actually get a lot more details around why those indicators are actually being found and the risk level of the device, so that you can make a decision around, well, this is actually bad. I need to stop the user from accessing the application, or I want to allow the user to log the user out and shut down the application, right? Or sometimes I just have to make the transaction read-only. Maybe they can still access the account detail, but not able to actually perform any transaction or payment, right? So all this logic can actually be decided by the application owner and the developer, right? So you can see how we can empower, with the solution to make life easier. And the solution is actually applicable for most of your critical applications out there, and it doesn't need a lot of engineering effort. Okay, so that is all, I guess, from my part. Just come back to my presentation, and I think we can take more question and answer later if anyone has any more question. But that's it. Thank you, everybody, for the.
Everybody, Pat, you may have another 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
Before we go for a break.
Okay. So do you? And
then followed by the Q&A. Okay. You can go for some use cases or whatever. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Let me do that. So let me maybe talk about a little bit about the technique. So how we can protect, and then I'll do the case studies. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So as we mentioned, some of the techniques out there. I think the important part is we realize when we work with many of the customers around protecting their application, it is very clear to us that the security is not a single point. It's about applying layers and about continuously getting feedback, right? So if you guys are familiar with the whole agile development process, it's about very quick iteration. You fail fast, and then you get feedback and you fix it, right? Not waiting for 9 months for the application to release and then, oh, it's actually not what I want, right? So we believe that the security should also be built into the whole process, right? And there's this notion called the DevSecOps. So really what we actually recommend is, as part of your development, rather than actually doing pen testing at the end of the life cycle, you want to be able to do early application scanning and risk assessment, right? This is very different to the source code scanning you guys do, right? Developer will have tools that already does the source code, look at cross-site scripting, SQL injection, etc. But we are actually looking at the application as a package before they go out to the user's device, right? Because in that package, there are third-party libraries. There are maybe Facebook SDKs, right? Maybe are vulnerable. Maybe there are tracking SDK or library that allow people to gather personal data of the user. So all these things are actually invisible to developer and to a lot of the security team, right? So by able to scan continuously, you get very early feedback around the posture, around privacy and security construct of the app. You actually get a much easier way of fixing the problem. When you just finish building the application, before you send it to the Google and Apple store, very important thing is you need to make sure the code is locked down, is hardened, that no one can very easily modify what Clement's doing. You want to make sure no one can do that, right? So you can actually do it by applying some shooting and reverse engineering technique, right? So we provide capability to do that. And the last thing that you saw before, now just on the dashboard, is feeding all that information back as part of the runtime feedback. So you know that, okay, out of all the users I have for my application, for example, a banking app, an e-payment application, these are the number of users that are running on compromised devices, etc., etc. Because by knowing those details, you then can manage your security, introducing features and fixes that will protect your organization, right? So more often when I talk to people, these are the three key components of the application lifecycle. Now, let me move on to the case study. So we actually have, I think probably the good one to share is the a large US bank, right? So they actually adopted our solution about 2.5 years ago, and they are very big consumer banking, right? So their challenge, 2 years ago was that there's a lot of the banking Trojan that target their own user, right? There were a lot of their mobile banking accounts are being a lot of report of the fraudulent activity. There's a lot of and those fraudulent activity result into investigation and rebate, etc., and cost them a lot of money. So essentially what they had is they had 60 million consumer user using their banking app, right? So they took our SDK, we provided them some best practices in the device, included the app, pushed the app into the App Store. The user download the new version, automatically it comes with our AI engine, and started to basically provide feedback around what type of risk and attack that the mobile application is actually seeing, right? So before that, they're actually not able to get any feedback, because when the application is jailbroken, they were actually being told by the regulators that they cannot shut down the app. So they have to allow the application to continue. They have no logging, they have no data point to see how much of these high-risk devices are accessing the transaction. So with the information that they have now, they were able to see out of the devices that's connected to their banking backend, right? How many devices are actually rooted and jailbroken, right? How many of them is not rooted and jailbroken? So about 1,000 devices. And then there's actually 4,000 of those devices, the application has been modified and tempered during the runtime, right? So again, you have no visibility today. These are probably high risk, users or attacker that's trying to reverse or attack your organization. But be able to see this, you can actually now take action, right? You can also see how many people are connected to a network that's compromised, because the example that Mira showed you very, very nicely around the banking transaction, where you are not actually doing the transaction well, the hacker can intercept the transaction, modify the amount, and you get paid less, right? So that type of information or attack technique can also be applied to mobile application to look at the payload and understand, what's being communicated. So that's another indicators, right? And then also, what about the environment? Remember the house. Does it have a leaky roof, right? Does it have a Trojan, fake application? Is the window open, right? So all these things allow the banking application within the first 30 days to actually saw these threats and then able to take action to prevent fraud. And this is actually a really good use case, because there's actually something tangible, right? But I just wanted to call out, right? Even you are not a bank, maybe your application doesn't actually provide transaction. Think about it from the perspective of the data and the user information, and also what's in the back end of your application, right? Because those are all critical, valuable to the businesses, also valuable to the attacker, right? Now, the next case study is actually a large payment consortium or company in Hong Kong, and they really introduced the solution, try to be differentiated with other payment application, right? So really in Hong Kong, there's a early regulation, peer-to-peer payment. They can only allow $10,000 Hong Kong dollar transactions. By using our solution together with the 2FA implementation in their app, they were able to essentially convince the monetary authority to increase the limit, so that they were the only application that can do higher transaction limit because of the security control they put in, right? So that's another great example of using the app protection in a way to enhance and drive the business growth, right? And the last example I'll share is actually from the government perspective. So this is a great example, I think, in the time of COVID as well. New York City actually was our customer using the solution that I shared earlier, right, to protect the employee of New York, government employees. And during the deployment of the solution, they actually found out that when the mayor of New York promised to the citizen, he promised clean water, clean air, and free Wi-Fi. And as you guys know, right, when the Wi-Fi is free, Clement or these bad guys are out there, they can actually compromise the network, and then they can attack the user. So they actually saw those data points from their own deployment, and they actually wanted to reallocate funding to actually help to protect the citizen, right? So one of the things they did is they actually divert the funding from the physical street crime into monies to actually fund the project here, and as the cyber crimes are increasing and street crimes are reducing. So essentially our application SDK was used. We actually worked with them to provide this application so that all the citizens of New York can download it. And actually, it's the first application that is pro-privacy for the citizen. So the user doesn't actually have to log in or provide their NRIC. Like if you look at COVID tracing application today, right? I think the Malaysian application, you actually have to put in some detail. But my understanding is that it doesn't have to be the real detail, right? But this application is collect zero data from the user, and it actually helps promote this well-being and protection, right? So we're trying to work with other cities around the world to actually provide this type of benefit to the user, because as you hear today, maybe since the morning, there are actually a lot of things that end user can actually benefit from these, right? So that will be the 3 case study that I have to share. So I think that with that, I think we'll end the presentation. Clement, how was the timing?
Yeah, good, great. Thanks, Pat. Thanks for the wonderful sharing, and a quick demo of how CIMB and Maybank doesn't pick up the detections on the jailbreaking stuff was very eye-opener. I think it would have helped a lot of people, at least from Malaysia, to understand how things or the state of affairs are. Guys, we will take 5 minutes break while Lai can actually play some music for you. We are going to actually collect all the questions and we are going to come back, right? You will be able to see all 3 of us in the same screen. Hold on for all those who have asked questions. There are some wonderful questions that has come up, and we can also share more on anything that we can actually clarify during this Ask the Expert or Ask the Speakers session. It's 4:30. We will start that by 4:35. Just give 5 minutes. Lai, are you here with us?
Yes, sure. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm
so
here.
you can actually keep us with an intercept, and we can actually have some musics. Hold the people. We will actually come back in 5 minutes after compiling the questions.